This is part 2 of a film about a voyage above the Arctic Circle to see the region's flora and fauna, including polar bears and musk oxen.
Greenland is a wonderful place. We need it for international security. And I'm sure that Denmark will come along. I think it's costing them a lot of money to maintain it.
The voyage departed from Longyearbyen on Svalbard, sailed along the west coast of Spitsbergen, transited across the Greenland Sea to Greenland, and then south along the east coast of Greenland before crossing the Denmark Strait to finish in Iceland. In part 2, we leave Smeerenberg and Svalbard and spend the next day and a half transiting across the Greenland Sea to Greenland proper. Pitching across the big swells of the Greenland Sea, we slowly got caught in fog, with the visibility decreasing until you could only see some 100 yards ahead of the ship.
Never stray from your group and the leaders carrying equipment to protect you.
As we neared the ice pack off Greenland, we sailed past our first iceberg. The vertical stripes of rock and soil indicated that the iceberg had calved from a glacier and subsequently rolled on its side. Finally, we reached the pack ice off of Greenland and sighted the first polar bear of what proved to be an unusually large number of them. The bear slowly sauntered over to the edge of the pack ice and entered the cold ocean waters. The polar bear's Latin name is Ursus maritimus, meaning sea bear, and one can easily see why that's the case. A polar bear's front paws propel them through the water, dog paddle style. The hind legs are held flat and used as rudders. A thick layer of fat, up to 4 inches or 11 centimeters thick, keeps the polar bear warm while swimming in the cold water. Polar bears are found throughout the circumpolar Arctic. Approximately 10% of the world's 25,000 polar bear population is found in Greenland. Polar bears are incredible swimmers. The longest recorded was by a bear, which swam for 232 straight hours, covering a distance of 427 miles or 687 kilometers, with speeds up to 3.7 miles per hour or 6 kilometers per hour. While polar bears are great swimmers, they need sea ice as a platform to hunt seals from, and then to eat them once they are killed. So any reduction in the ice coverage is a problem. Witnessing such a large land animal swimming so well was very impressive. It was obvious that the bear was completely at ease swimming in the ocean. Polar bears can travel more than 1,900 miles or 3,000 kilometers per month, and their home ranges can exceed an area larger than California in a year. After feeding throughout the summer, a pregnant female polar bear builds a maternity den in the autumn where she gives birth and nurses her cubs, which are usually 2 in number. She'll emerge with her cubs in the spring and head out onto the sea ice to find seals to hunt, which means the mother lasts up to 8 months without food. The mother needs to be in good enough body condition after the birth of her cubs to be able to produce sufficient milk for them during the average 2.5 years they stay together as a family group. The cub mortality rate is very high, at upwards of 50%. The ice pack off the Store Coldway, or Big Coldway Island in the middle of the east coast of Greenland, proved to be an excellent area to see polar bears, which are the largest land carnivores. An adult male can weigh up to 1,800 pounds or 800 kilograms.
Where is it?
Okay, you see the first big iceberg we come to? Go to the second one. Not the first big one, right here.
Yeah.
Like, go to the second one, behind it, go on the far right, left-hand side. It's on the tip of the point of that ice. Polar bears will sometimes eat snow, but not usually in great quantities, as it requires energy to melt it. Eating snow tends to be something the bears do when they wish to cool down. Polar bear is a hypercarnivore, meaning that its diet is more than 70% meat. It mainly preys on ice-living seals and consumes their energy-rich blubber. Males sometimes kill polar bear cubs to bring their mothers back into estrus, but they also kill the young outside the breeding season for food. Polar bears rely on raw power when trying to kill their prey, relying on bites and paw swipes. They have the strength to pull a mid-sized seal right out of the water. As the apex predator of the Arctic, adult polar bears have no natural predators except other polar bears. Polar bear's fur isn't actually white. Their hair is actually without color. Each hair shaft is pigment-free and transparent, with a hollow core that scatters and reflects visible light, which makes their hair appear white to the human eye, much like what happens with ice and snow. Polar bears are typically solitary, aside from mothers with cubs and mating pairs. So-called polar bear swims or plunges are held around the world, but the duration of these are minuscule compared to the swims undertaken by polar bears. The polar bear is closely related to the brown bear, and the two species can interbreed, since polar bears evolved from brown bears during the ice ages. Polar bears roll in the snow in order to dry off a bit following a swim. Leaving the ice pack and its polar bears, we sailed south to Mygbukta, scheduled to be our first landing site on Greenland. Mygbukta means Mosquito Bay, as it is known for its many biting insects. Sailing south, we were soon out of the ice pack, but the icebergs persisted. Off Mygbukta, a polar bear was spotted moving along the shore towards our landing site. This meant that we couldn't land there, so we sailed on to a different landing site at Kap Humboldt. Nearing Kap Humboldt, we passed by a large iceberg with a huge hole in it. The arch portion of the hole was slowly collapsing, and within several hours the arch was completely gone when we landed on Kap Humboldt. The focal point of the landing at Kap Humboldt was the old trapper's hut. On Greenland's east coast, there were about 350 historic trapper huts and stations scattered throughout the northeast Greenland National Park. This is because the trapping strategy was to construct several small huts about 10 miles or 15 kilometers apart. The huts were used usually for short overnight stays for 1 or 2 people. Using this hut network, trappers on dog sleds could travel for several weeks and cover a large area. Trapping foxes in Greenland was a big business from about 1908 to 1960 and has left many visible traces of the practice on the landscape. Trapping was conducted by people and companies from Norway and Denmark. Obviously, foxes in the Arctic grow their best fur during the winter. However, it was only possible to travel to northeast Greenland in the summer, requiring trappers to overwinter to catch the foxes at their prime. There were no regulations, so trapping was open to anybody to try their luck. At the time, fox pelts were the height of fashion, and they were used to make ladies' stoles, coats, and wraps. In the 1930s, fox pelts sold for between $7 and $40, depending on their quality and their color. This contrasts with the daily wage for an unskilled laborer being only 50 cents. Hence, there was a lot of motivation to trap in Greenland despite its challenging conditions. Sailing past the Greenland icebergs at night, I couldn't help but think of the night of April 15, 1912, when the Titanic sideswiped a Greenland iceberg and quickly sank, taking some 1,500 people to a watery grave. Late at night, a boat from the Sirius Dog Sled Patrol arrived to check our paperwork that was required to visit the Northeast Greenland National Park. The Sirius Patrol is a Danish naval unit established in 1941 that enforces Danish sovereignty in northern and eastern Greenland. Leaving Kap Humboldt, we cruised overnight along Kaiser Franz Josef Fjord to Blomsterbugt, or Flower Bay. Disappointingly, the promised spectacular sunrise at 4 a.m. proved to be an hour late and less than spectacular. The mountains on both sides of the fjord were brilliantly colored, layered, and folded sandstone. We landed on Ymers for a long hike. The orange color of the bright orange lichen comes from a carotenoid pigment like those found in carrots and pumpkins, which protects the lichen from UV radiation. We passed by a trapper's cabin as we started a long 5-hour hike out of the valley and into the surrounding hills. Dwarf birch has small round leaves that turn a variety of colors in the fall, ranging from orange to a beautiful scarlet. As we reached the saddle at the end of the valley, the landscape opened into a wide basin filled with a large lake named Noasui. On the lake were loons, also known as great northern divers. We explored the area leading down to the lake and spotted a muskox grazing right in front of us. The muskox's outer layer of hair, known as guard hair, protects them from insects and sheds away water from their skin, while beneath kiviat grows. Kiviat is one of the unique adaptations of the muskox, which makes it possible to survive the freezing Arctic winters. On the ground was a ball of kiviat, which is the soft down underwool shed by the muskox. Kiviat is one of nature's finest fibers, with a diameter that is approximately 30% more fine than the finest cashmere. As well, it is not itchy or scratchy like wool. There were actually 2 muskoxen on the rocky hill above us, but it was a challenge to pick them up from the muskox-sized boulders. Eventually, a bull and a cow were spotted, but they also spotted us, and in a flash they were off over the hill. As elsewhere in Greenland, there were a surprising number of mushrooms to be found. Our hike continued ever upwards towards the Chocolate Mountain. It was great to see an Arctic hare enjoying the sun amongst the rocks. Unlike their cousins further south, Arctic hares this far north, where summer is very short, remain white all year round. This makes them rather obvious to spot in the summer months, so they frequently hide in the shelter of large rocks to stay out of the sight of predators. Predators of the Arctic hare include foxes, wolves, raptors, and occasionally humans. The Arctic hare survives the Arctic cold due to adaptations including shortened limbs, a small nose, fat that makes up close to 20% of its body, and a thick coat of fur. Our hike climaxed after an elevation gain of 3,000 feet or 915 meters, and then it was time for the slog back to the landing beach. Once back on board, the ship cruised into Ice Fjord through the remarkable landscape of shimmering icebergs and extraordinary geology to Redbunkton Bay or Reindeer Bay, whilst we enjoyed ice cream sundaes. We met the sailing vessel Rembrandt van Ryn, a beautiful 3-masted schooner evoking a bygone era when sail power ruled the waves. Unfortunately, the conditions were not right for the Rembrandt to be under sail, so we missed that magnificent sight. Surprisingly, Rembrandt is flagged in Vanuatu, which I happened to have visited a couple of years ago. It is a 3-masted schooner currently employed for both Arctic and Antarctic cruises by Ocean-Wide Expeditions. She was built in 1924 in the Netherlands as a fishing lugger. A Zodiac from the Rembrandt came by to pick up some food supplies for their ship. At Redbunkton, we went on a Zodiac cruise to see its towering cliffs and icebergs up close. Ironically, there are no reindeer in the area of Redbunkton or Reindeer Bay since reindeer disappeared from the area in 1900 through migration to West Greenland. The enormous cliff height is shown by the tiny dots at the base, which are zodiacs. The pattern formed by the droppings from the galls in the cliff was surprisingly artistic, resembling a bird in flight. There were a wide variety of shapes and sizes of bergs and bergy bits, including ones that resembled penguins kissing and another that resembled a cup holder. The most beautiful icebergs were those with bands of blue and aquamarine colored ice that glimmered in the low-angled sun. Near the bergy bits, one can hear the air bubbles trapped in the ice make a snap, crackle, and pop sound as the ice melts. It sounds like a giant bowl of Rice Krispies and milk. At the end of the bay was an old trapper's hut and a group of musk oxen, including one running at full tilt to rejoin the group. Returning to the ship, we had an excellent view of two bearded seals that were resting on an ice floe. Bearded seals are the largest species of Arctic seal. They can grow up to 8 feet long and range up to 800 pounds. Leaving Renbugten, we sailed towards Maria U, or Maria Island. The island was named after Nat Horst's daughter when he explored the area in 1899. Maria Ö is a small island of not more than 25 square kilometers or 10 square miles. It is home to round boulder-like hills that peak at around 200 meters or 656 feet. We didn't encounter any fauna whilst hiking in these hills, however we did have many beautiful views of the landscape. Across the fjord was the 264-passenger Seabourn Venture, an ultra-luxury expedition cruise ship with a PC-6 ice-strengthened hull. Surprisingly, it carries two 6-passenger submarines. It was a revelation to see a wolf spider. The spider does not make webs to catch prey, but hunts small insects on the ground using its venom that paralyzes the prey. Some of the views on the island were stunning. This was my favorite view on Maria Ö. From Maria Ö, it was a very short jog over to the much larger island of Ella Ö. During World War II, the U.S. military established a radio, weather, and sledge patrol station called Bluey East 4 on the island. Bluey was the U.S. military code name for Greenland. The Danish Serious Dog Sled Patrol maintains a small base on the northern coast of the island, which is staffed only in the summer. We landed on the island just out of sight of a family group of musk oxen, which we snuck up on to watch them graze. The mother had a calf and juvenile with her, so she was extra cautious as they grazed. Finally, the mother caught wind of us, and she and her family ran off to the distant hills. We watched them running until they disappeared into the big landscape as a beautiful and rare ice bow appeared overhead. The musk oxen left behind some kiviat and of course droppings. LE hosts the remains of ancient Thule semi-subterranean houses. The nearby ice-free waters made the island an attractive location to hunt marine resources year-round. The sun setting over Kong-Oskar Fjord at 10 p.m. was beautiful. The scene included icebergs, a sailing ship, snow-covered mountains, and a lenticular cloud capping the top of a hill. With the sunset over, the scene, although still interesting, was much less stunning. In part 3 of this voyage, we continue sailing southwards, exploring the east coast of Greenland, focusing on the interesting fjords branching off from the large Kong-Oskar Fjord. If you enjoyed this film, please subscribe and like. There are many more similar films available on my channel.